a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend.
Well, hey there, family. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. You know me, I'm your host, Dr. Erica Holmes, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, if you watched last week, you know today is a continuation. Are you ready for part 2 of talking to the men about the importance of male relationships and not isolating? So because it's part 2, it's going to be a little different. No water cooler this evening. We're going to jump right into our conversation, the second half of our conversation. So stay tuned. We're going to give you a few seconds. Call your fathers, your uncles, your brothers, your nephews, your cousins, your co-workers. Have them tune in. We want men to be connected so that they can be supported, they can have accountability, and they can feel loved on and protected. So let's get into part 2. All right, and we are back. Now, we left you hanging last week, but we are back with part 2, talking to some of the men at Faithful Central, actually some of the pastors at Faithful Central Bible Church here in Inglewood. I'm going to reintroduce them. If you haven't seen part 1, I suggest you go back, look at part 1, because this is going to be a follow-up. But let's start with a reintroduction, and then we're going to jump right back into our conversation. So here we have Pastor Bob Gay. Again, one of his many hats is being the pastor of men's discipleship. We got Pastor Rondell Eskridge. One of his many hats is being the pastor of our youth ministry here. And then we have Pastor J. Patrick Wise, who is the pastor of digital discipleship. Oh, that's a tongue twister.
Mouthful.
And believe me, he has multiple hats. You know, you've seen him here on Living Well, doing the download and all kinds of other things running around. So thank you all for taking time out. I'm just excited. Let's jump back into the conversation. We're talking about men. We're talking about the importance of men having relationships with other men, which we don't talk about a lot, right? So I want to jump into, like, what are the messages that men get from society about having male friendships, and how do those messages seep into the church? So that's twofold. So what did y'all learn about having male friends and the importance of male friends, even growing up or even reinforced now today? And then are those messages also in the church?
So here's what I'll say. I got saved at 29. So I have this whole nother life with friends from the east side.
Right.
Okay. That's a whole mentality by itself.
That's right.
Okay?
We grew up on the east side.
That's exactly right. Whole mentality by itself. So when Romans 12:1-2 talks about being not conformed to this world, it's talking about not being squeezed into the mold. When I first read it, I was taken back to the time in elementary school when I went to the Mattel factory and I first saw injection molding. And it's hot plastic being put into a mold that then shapes the object, and then they pull it away and let it cool. I think that the world has taught us how to fit into what they believe is successful in the way that we ought to be, and that we have conformed ourselves. Then all of a sudden we get saved and we come in, but the scales haven't dropped off. Some of that stuff still stays with us, and it's only by the word of God, it's only by the Holy Spirit, and it's by iron sharpening iron that men then say, well, wait a minute, now that's not cool, okay? Or you talking about your wife like that, that's not right, okay? Only somebody with standing can say to another man, that's not cool. If you don't have any standing, you can't do anything. But the challenge has been that people have one foot in the world, one foot in the church, and they haven't quite decided which one is the most legitimate part they ought to be in. And so they straddle. And it's up to those of us involved in discipleship to really help them go completely over to Christ. But it takes time to do it. It takes an authenticity. It takes the ability to be able to show them what's profitable and what's not profitable. If they can't see it in you, if they honestly don't see it in you, then there's not a whole lot you could say or do. You can go to all the ball games you want.
Right.
But you have to be able to be authentic, and you have to be able to show them that it works.
Can you read the question one more
So
time?
the question was, what are society's messages about friendships between men, and have those messages seeped in? Like, what did you learn? Did you learn that men friendships were important, or you could do it on your own?
Well, I think from a young age, boys, making friends wasn't hard. We played outside, we rode bikes, we got in fights together. You know what I mean? Our parents told us the same thing. Don't let nobody ride your bike. Don't let nobody take your ball. And so you develop this bond, when you're young. So I think that boys who are not dealing with a lot of social issues, they gravitate very easily, right? And I think that in the 80s, it was a lot different than it is now. There's a lot of, more mental and emotional health issues now than I think we were dealing with then. Everything was far more simple. Even our parents are far more simple. The time we got to spend with them was a little bit more simple. Now, you need like 3 jobs to live in LA. So you got kids, everything is pushed back, and so at that time, you had this mutual understanding of what you guys do and what you don't do, right? For my friends, we all had the same type of moms, and and those that had dads, same type of dads, right? We don't steal. You know what I mean? We are respectful when our elders come around. It don't mean that we perfect,
Right.
but we had an agreement amongst our friend group that this is who we are and this is how we are, right? I think as Pastor Bob spoke on is that there's this idea in the world that if you're my friend, you let me do anything, right? And so the difference between, I would say, being in the church and being in the world is you stand for nothing, right? If you allow me to do this, then you're really my friend. When you get saved, it's the complete opposite.
Correct.
It is, if I see you doing that, I'm going to say something, right? And so that was the transition in my friendships from getting saved to not being saved. It was, now I got to look at my friends and I realize, okay, y'all doing stuff that I don't really want no part in, and you don't want me saying anything about it. So then our friendship starts to fade from there, right?
Yes.
And then I gain new friends, and we have this understanding, again, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. But if you're doing that, it's my responsibility to address it.
Yes.
If you are a real friend and a man, then you can receive that chastening,
Right.
right? I'll give you guys an example. This is after Christ. There's these 4 guys I'm in a text message thread. We're friends. We're all married. We are holding each other up in our marriages and different things like that. And one of them goes rogue, right? We find out. So we just find out from his wife that he's going to divorce her, right? And she was a friend of ours even before he came into the picture. We put him into our fold, right? And we like, dang, we ain't hear nothing about a divorce or even like big issues or nothing. Talk to her, and she's like, well, he took a trip to Europe a month ago all by himself. And we like, wait,
Well, what?
we in a whole text
Right.
together. You said nothing about that. Hey, well, actually, he's already got a whole nother apartment. I'm like, wait, what? So we find out all of this backstory, and he told me not to say anything to you. So now you muscling her as well. And so after that, it was like, bro, we need to talk. Long story short, that talk ended our friendship, our connection. And there is no connection at all. So I would say, again, when you get saved now, we are holding each other up
Right.
in a standard versus when you're not saved, it's more so like live and let live. Go ahead, you do you, bro, and I'm not gonna say nothing. That means I know we can't be friends because I'm gonna say something.
Right.
And I want you to say something to me. Right.
Yeah, I think for some men, the message that society gives you around the nature of relationships, but also even just your personhood, is that you don't matter. Right? So now you're seeing men wallowing in isolation, addicted to porn, playing video games to excess, jumping in these chat rooms and different things that are happening online, all to find some piece of a community, a place where I can find identity. When in a world that's changing so much with advancements in technology and advancements in the workforce, who am I in the midst of all this? Does anybody understand me?
Yeah.
You have statistics now about the impacts of social media and the impacts of loneliness and how that shows up. People committing heinous acts of violence against one another. But it's all because I don't have community. I don't have a place that reaffirms my value. Second question is, how does that show up in the church? I think a part of that answer depends on which church you're talking about. Because sad as it is to say, some churches build their ministry, and I gotta be careful how I say this, build their ministry by lifting up women by using men as a footstool. In other words, if the man is the problem in your life and God has come to show you how valuable you are as a woman, so that you use that man's back to step up higher to advance his call for your life. And the man was the hindrance to the blessing that are coming in your life. Now the man is a problem. So if that's a message that's coming from that church, as a man, I don't want anything to do with that church.
Wow.
So it depends on which church you're talking about, because there are other ministries where as soon as you get out of your car, you're greeted by a man. You're led to your seat by a man. There are men in suits protecting you. So you're in a sanctuary and you feel this added level of safety because the presence of men on that campus or in that congregation is so heavy and so prevalent and so visible. So I think it depends which church you're talking about and how that church chooses to facilitate the life of men and steward it in that way.
And another thing, I think men understand that if you come to this church for the first time and you have a husband I've never met, I may not say anything to you in the first 10 seconds when you guys walk up. It's my goal to address him.
No question.
So that he knows that one, ain't nothing else going on.
Right.
But two, that he's valuable. Because I think there's a history of men who are not in leadership at church not being valuable.
Yeah.
Right. And so men are leery of it. They like, man, is it one of those churches where, like you said, the pastor's always bigging up the women, but he's not talking about the husbands and he's not talking about the men who are fortifying you. He's actually breaking those men down and getting the loyalty from the women. So a lot of the men are like, man, I'm not going there. Right. And then if he's already having issues in his relationship and then he comes here and she's treated like an angel.
Yeah.
And he's demonized and he like, yeah, but I know her in secret.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? So he's like, I ain't going to that place either, because now he feels like she's unauthentic, but she gets to be unauthentic and be celebrated in that space, and where he is going to be looked at as like, well, why aren't you here all the time? So he feels judged.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that. Some of that problem is the pastor's a man of the house. And he's a man of multiple houses because he's been esteemed as such, and he's positioned himself in the life of some of the women parishioners as the figurehead. So now it's like, I don't even want to hear what my husband has to say because he's a weak man by comparison to the pastor.
Right.
So now what's my incentive to go to that place?
Right.
The thing, in the additional problem with that is so much of manhood, and even it kind of creeps over into our relationships, is that we're necessary in value on the basis that we provide something. So in other words, if I don't have anything to contribute, if I don't have anything to sow monetarily into your life, using church terms, if I don't have resources, then I'm not valuable. I'm not necessary. So if I don't have money to give you, if I can't support the lifestyle that you want to live, if I don't have a foot to contribute towards advancing your personal cause, then I have no value to you.
Right.
So I don't want to go to that church.
Right. And when I listen to
you talk about what's happening to the men and what happens when they go to the church, it makes me think about how easy it is for men to then slip into isolation and fall into some of these, dangerous spots that you just mentioned, such as, porn and different things like that, and find themselves, just isolated in a room, even if you are just, carefully say, wasting away playing video games. What's happening is there is no connection. And we know that, isolation is not good. It's not good for the mind. It's not good for the body. Do you guys find that you know a lot of men, or there are men that you can think about that really do slip into isolation and the dangers of that?
Look, it's the nature of my job to sit with these men both individually and collectively. We've got whole groups focused around sexual addiction. A number of those men are married, and yet they isolate themselves, believing that they are getting something that they cannot get in their marriage. Isolation is the sermon that amens itself. You just over and over again justify your behavior. And it's hence no more excuses, because what ends up happening is you say to yourself, I need this. No one else understands me. I deserve this. And then you say, but I can't get this if I show up at church, or I'll be shamed, or I'll be condemned. They know they need help, but the pleasures of sin last for a season. Doesn't say it's not pleasurable. So they're getting all that they can get while they can get it. The woman comes in, wife, girlfriend, whatever, sees what's going on, and then the man further isolates himself, because she now has looked at the situation and said, so what, you're replacing me with this? And I've been doing all this for you, and so forth and so on. And he continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. And so if then she says you need help, then he'll resist that coming from her, because he's already devalued the relationship. That's why he's on porn in the first place. And it just keeps going like that until he is gripped to the point either the relationship is about to go down the tubes, or the kids are about to leave him, or something else. But even with that, it's a challenge. So I had a situation where my wife said to me on a Friday night, she said, so what do you have tomorrow morning? And I said, I have nothing tomorrow morning. Sleeping in. Ring. It's a wife. Husband's off the reservation. 2 counties over.
Yeah.
And she knows what's going on and says he's going to be here tomorrow morning at such and such a time. Can you come over? And so I go there, knock on the door. He answers the door. I take him to Starbucks. And I'll just share with you, one of the things I said to him, I said, man, you are so wrong that you need to grease your belly and slide under the door and stay face down till your wife tells you to get up.
Oh my.
Well, that's how real men talk. Okay. That's how real men talk. Okay. Okay. Well, because there's no way in the world, there's no way you're right about what you're doing.
Right.
And you're going to come and go when you please, and so forth and so on.
And you can manipulate her.
Right. And then you're going to show up at Champion Men.
Yes.
And you want something to say. No, we have to, and so there are a myriad of things, and it's this honesty that men can have to say, your loneliness is created because you don't want to confront and deal with what's really going on in your life. And you need to get to the root cause of why you feel you need to be this way. And the longer you stay here, the less connected you are with Christ, because I guarantee you, if they're feeling lonely, they're not talking to God. They're not reading scripture. They're not praying. It's all of those things, and it just starts to compound itself over and over and over again.
Yeah. This is good. Go ahead. No, if you had something to add, I was just going to say, one of the things that I would love to hear about was, the how y'all address conflict. But go ahead.
I would say that isolation is a sign of sin.
Say that again.
People in the back, a little louder.
As Pastor Bob, so eloquently put it, right? It's like if I haven't seen you, if you're not engaging, if we haven't had a conversation, if you don't want to have a conversation, for me, that's a sign that you are struggling in some areas that you don't want to talk about. And the hard part with men is this: if he's not ready to come out of it, he gonna avoid all connection. When he is ready to come out of it, you start to see little hints of it. You know, they hit you up, you know, they send you a message. Or if they don't have a wife, right, if they're single, but they still isolating, that's a little tougher. If they got a wife, the wife is like, hey, you need to come on over here. But if they're single, you almost gotta, you know, hey, bro, I ain't heard from you in a while.
Right.
What you over there doing? Come on, come on out of there. And for them, it's a God sign, because you can get stuck in that place in your sin, you know, in that isolation mode, and you waiting on God to come get you. And sometimes it's your brother that calls you, that lets you know, okay, I've been here too long, and you actually been waiting to be rescued. But the way men function and work, you very rarely, unless it really has gotten bad or they got exposed in some way, that's when they'll reach out. Like, man, I messed up big time. You know, I found they on the Steve Harvey Shirley letter. You know what I mean?
Letter,
They on the strawberry letter. Then they'll call you like, bro, I need some answers. I need you to fix this. Help me fix it. Right? But other than that, you know, when they start to isolate, it's a sign. And then how you address that, generally, I'm strategizing, right? As a man, it's not right away, right? Pastor Bob probably spent all night saying, okay, what time I'm going to show up at his house, what I'm going to say when I get there. When he opens this door, he probably had a whole vision in his head.
Let me just say to you, it ain't all night.
Let me
tell you something. Let me tell you something I've learned. Okay, that when somebody says pray for me and they're in that kind of situation, I can't stay up all night. I'm gonna get some sleep. God's gonna stay up all night. We're gonna let Him handle that portion. I'm gonna do what I can do and then get up. But you limit how much you can give a person, because you want to see what their response is to what you're offering them, and whether or not they in fact really want help, or whether they say they just want to get out of the situation that they're in right now, only to fall back to it later on.
Which goes to the point of strategizing and needing to know what to say, how much of it to say.
Right. Exactly. At least that's what I'm going to be doing, right? I'm like, what kind of state is he going to be in when I get there, right? How do I get him away from her? How do I get him? Now, he can get there and say no to everything, but I'm still in my mind strategizing as to how I'm going to address this whole situation.
Yeah. Isolation.
You had a question about conflict?
Oh, yeah. No, I was just listening, and we've been talking about, or just thinking back even on our last conversation about the differences, and we were talking about the communication, and then I just got naturally curious, like, I would love to know, like, how do you guys navigate conflict in the relationship, or like holding on to the friendship? You know, because we know how it looked for women, but I'm just curious, especially since there's this code amongst men when you talk. I want to know what that looks like when it comes to...
And we want the real.
The real.
When you guys start taking off your earrings, the conflict is pretty clear.
You know.
It depends on your age.
Okay.
Because I'll just share a little freely. There were times like, let's just fight. And after we fight, we shake hands. We hug. Like in the same space.
Gotcha.
Hey, we good? We good? You good? You good? We good. You dap it up and we're back playing sports or whatever it is the next day. Right. But I think as you age a little bit, you realize, hey, I don't need to be fighting. Like, one bad punch.
Right.
Somebody hip going out.
Yeah. Like my life is in a different direction. My life is going in a different direction.
Yeah.
So in those instances, I think one thing that we as men have to be mindful of, now then I'll address it directly, is that this inclination towards passivity. Is to let conflict just exist in perpetuity, with the thought that maybe it'll just kind of drift away, which is something that we can be prone to do, depending on how much we value the relationship, but it also depends on how much interaction we have with the person. So in other words, if I have conflict with somebody that I don't see regularly, some men might just let that kind of just die on the vine, and then when I see you again, we'll just kind of be cordial. But in other instances where there's conflict, we got to get direct. We got to get on the phone call. And in most instances, it has to happen face to face.
Gotcha.
It's like, no, like where we meeting? And we already know what's on the agenda.
Got it.
Right.
I'm not talking about anything else but the conflict.
Right.
And we'll be here till we get that resolved.
You have the difficult conversation.
Yeah.
And we can't function with each other unless it happens.
Yes.
Women can function.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I work. It starts young. I'm working with youth. 2 girls, 3 girls can have a conflict the whole school year. I mean, she done got a whole slew of people on her side, on their side. They posting stuff, sending messages. They don't and they might not fight till the end of the school year or something, right? Where there's like a confrontation.
Right.
Boys can't function like that. If we're gonna be in the same energy, same space, we got to talk about this. Or we got to fight. Like you said, we don't know what to do with that energy.
Right.
So if I genuinely don't like you and you genuinely we're not going to be around each other.
Got it.
Or we got to fight so we can get it out, right? I also think, side note, I also think that that's why it's really hard when I'll say this, when a masculine man has conflict with a woman, a man who's sure of himself, when a woman is going off the radar on him and screaming and yelling, and she wondering why he quiet. He can't do anything with that energy.
Right.
Because if another man is screaming and yelling at you, that means we got to fight. He goes physical real fast. We playing basketball, let's just fight. It's not going to be a whole bunch of back and forth. It's too much energy. You know what I mean? We just got to go at it. So when a woman is doing that, he doesn't know what to do with that energy, but be quiet. I got to digress. I can't go to your level.
Right.
That's not who I am.
Right.
Because this level says fight level.
Right.
Now, for a man who's not that, he's going to end up fighting with her.
Right.
But for men who are not that, they just got to get quiet and wait for you to calm down so that we can have a conversation where you can hear me.
Right.
But if you can't hear me, I'm not saying nothing. Right? So for men, we cannot exist in the tension for too long.
That's good.
We got to talk about it. I got to say what needs to be said. And then see how you respond to it. And if you respond to it right, then our relationship continues. If you respond to it wrong, I know where we stand.
So let me give you 2 real life situations that have occurred in Champion Men. So we had a meeting with one of those groups with men with special needs in a room in the counseling center. And it doesn't have a name on the door, and everybody there is confidential. And one former NFL player got into it with somebody else that was there. The NFL player was to be a mentor and got into it in a discussion, and he rose up. Now, when men get out of their seat and stand up, that's a real clear sign that something's about to jump off.
Right.
Okay? Somebody either is going to back down or something else, right? So he then, the NFL player, former NFL player, lunged at the other brother. And I had to pick him up and get him out of the room. Okay? It had gotten to that point inside the room. And then he calmed down. I said, "You're supposed to be leading." And I'm outside of Charlene's office in that little seating area, reception area, and I'm talking to this brother while some other men are trying to calm the other man down inside of me. That's one. And then we came back in. Second one is we're at Champion Men, and at the time I wasn't leading a table, and I just went around from table to table listening to discussions. And I heard something that was theologically off from somebody who was new. And so my job is, of course, make sure it's balanced. And I said, no. And so then the guy said something. You could tell the conversation was back. And this guy's new. He just walked in off the street. And I felt it was time for me to get up. And I got up from the table. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, so you leaving? What kind of punk are you?"
Oh.
Right. Now, we talked about where I'm from. So I looked at him, and he's talked about this. I'm processing. Now, what I was processing is, which way is he going to fall? To your point. That's what I was processing. At which point, Deacon Maurice Hill was at the same table, and he got up, and the guy said, "Well, what are you, his bodyguard?" And Deacon Maurice Hill, retired sheriff, showed him his badge. And then another brother, another retired sheriff from another county got up and showed his badge. And then I said, and there's 2 more in the room. And so then they ushered the man out of the room. You're going to have that. He was new. He's never been back. He had no idea when he said what he said to me, what it triggered, nor what I was thinking.
Right.
Because from where I'm from, those are fighting words.
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
So you're going to end up in legitimate church-sponsored meetings with men who are having conflict. And I was thinking also, now if I do this, what is this going to say about the church? Okay, I'm going to be in Bishop's office trying to give some explanation for what is going on.
You would.
And I think that we have to gather ourselves, again, to your point. When you're older, you start thinking about how much you have to lose if you act like you did when you had nothing to lose.
Right.
And you can't do that.
Right.
I'm not just talking about your mortgage or your family. It's also your reputation.
Yeah.
And so you have to gather yourself and you have to move along. I don't know what that other man's situation was, whether he had nothing to lose and whether that was his normal conversation.
Right.
That's not normal conversation in my circle.
Right.
Okay. And he didn't understand it nor realize it, but you're going to end up with conflict. And it's not going to be every day, but it's going to come up from time to time. And the leader has to know how to handle it.
It's so interesting. I'm just listening to you all. I don't know if you know this, but my husband and her husband are best friends. That's actually how we met. People think that we met first.
Yes.
They met.
They met
and
first.
then it was like, oh, Lord, if y'all going to be close, please let us. And we thank God.
Ooh, that's a blessing.
Right.
Because that don't work out
It
like that
doesn't.
all
It
the time. If the
doesn't.
wives don't get it,
No.
you can forget about it.
Exactly.
Why are you going over there? Why are you hanging out with them?
And when
That's how we knew that this relationship was because we just organically
Exactly.
just
Because
kind of
initially
melted, blended.
they formed fast, and we both were at home like, you don't know him.
Right.
Well, how y'all
No,
friends
what you
already?
really meant was, I don't know.
Exactly.
Because they got close real
We
quick.
were like, wait a minute, exactly. So then we got to be like, okay, and his wife what?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. So then we became friends. But we tease them because they're both alpha male, and there's things we don't understand.
Yeah.
And one day, and I can tell this story. They're all right. One day, I was with them. We were coming from a meeting, and it was just me and our 2 husbands. She wasn't there, and for some reason, they got into it in the car. I'm in the passenger seat, her husband in the back, and they arguing in the car. So I'm sitting there like. Then we get to my house because her husband had come parked at our house. They get out the car. And they are hollering at the top of their lungs. And I'm like, I don't even know what it's about, but they going at it. And I'm like, and they old. I'm like, is this going to devolve? Like, what? Because I was like, we don't, not our friends. We're not getting to that level. And then I'm in the neighborhood, it's quiet. So I look at my husband, I said, get in the house. And you go home. I'm like, what? So my husband snatched his jacket. He had on a suit too. Y'all acting. So then he goes in the house and he paces for a little while. And I was like, what are y'all talking about? Nothing. And then later on that evening, they in there on the phone and then they're like, yeah, man, all right. I'm like, how y'all go from a 12 to now y'all like, man, yeah. I was so confused. I was so men-handled. I was like, exactly. Women, we gotta talk. Then we crying once we make up, and then with all of that, they was like, yeah, man.
Look, if I saw 2 women doing that outside the house, I'd have used my key, gone inside the house, closed the door. I'd have gone on about my business because I know I wouldn't be able to resolve any of that conversation whatsoever. No.
We need a little more
exactly.
time.
And I was just sitting up there, and I was like, okay, you can mess up that friendship if you want to, but we still gonna be friends. You
I
gonna
don't
be by
think they
yourself.
saw the friendship as being impaired.
At all.
They didn't see it as
Not at all.
They were
I'm like, if
we
you
good.
exactly,
But you're thinking in a female context, if we rose to that level,
Then it must
be bad.
brains would be flying over here and all kinds of stuff would be going on.
And she, they cooled down on the phone.
That heifer, that's
Exactly.
what conversation.
All of that.
I
all of that.
remember me and my brother, we played for the same college basketball team. And we got into a fight on the court. Coach called my mom.
The two brothers. You two.
Yep, me and my brother.
You're playing on the same team.
Same team. It's practice. And we get into a fight in practice. And I was mad. He's my older brother. He's a little taller than me. And I was working this one guy. He on the other team. My brother switched because he know my moves. So he started guarding me. So I'm like, no, let him take his whooping. What you doing? And my brother blocked my shot. I was so hot, I threw the ball at his head. Threw the ball at his head. He charged me. I charged him. We wrestling. Coach, the teammates looking at us, so they get us apart. Coach sent me to the locker room. He called my mom and said, they got into a fight today. My mom is livid. What y'all doing fighting? And me and him start laughing. See y'all laughing? Because my mom she didn't even really get it. She like, you embarrassing us.
That's the shame factor.
Yeah, that's the shame. And I'm like, no, it's in the heat of the moment.
Right.
We playing basketball.
Cool.
When we got to the locker room, we was all, we was all good. It's something weird, but we can compartmentalize.
Yes.
This was between the lines. This is not, I hate my brother. We got a bad relationship.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so with you guys in situations like, no, they got a great relationship. But this thing right here, we're going to hash this thing out. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
The funny thing is, in that situation, you may have never said, I'm sorry.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
You never said, I'm sorry. It's just, we cool.
Yeah, but you can't carry that over into a relationship with a female and not say you're
not
sorry.
at all, not at all.
You gonna say you're sorry because we not gonna finish this thing. They close until I say I'm sorry.
And we need to talk about what happened. How did it start?
Right, yeah.
And then when did it go off the rail?
Right. And what the one person meant.
And what I thought you said. We got to do all of that.
We might make a comment like your team still sucks. Just want you to know. And you know what I mean? We're gonna go get some food.
Right.
Because you don't know what that argument was over. It could have been a sports analogy. It could have been anything that they was passionate about.
Yes.
And you might make a comment like you still was wrong. And keep on going.
I'm getting some clarity because I was confused that day. I was like, the friendship over.
Yes.
We don't have to figure this out.
Now, what they do get from the both of us, what?
Exactly. Exactly.
Just
And we both
knock
say
that
it to
off.
each
We
other.
both say it
To both of them.
Are you? Knock it off.
Exactly. And
Then
go
go
on.
on.
Okay, so we're getting close to a close, but I did want you to give some last words of wisdom to men who might be struggling to find the types of connections that you all talked about in part one, and the connections where you could have the conflict and make up and move on. What would you say to men who might be struggling to find other men to connect with in their lives?
A friend who wants friends must show himself to be friendly. And so you may need to examine why you are isolating. You may need to examine whether you were influenced to be that way and whether you saw that in the home and you saw that within the family, or whether that's no longer productive in this season that we're in right now or your season of life, and that you need something different. I think you may not get that from the pulpit. You may need a smaller gathering of people that may look at you and welcome you in, knowing that you need it without saying to you, you need this. And then it develops as you go along. And I think that's the process that is unique to men that incorporates them into something they may not organically decide that they're going to do.
I'm going to say this. Men need relationship with other men. I'd venture to say if you don't have meaningful relationship or fellowship with other men, you cannot be a great man. That's how deep it is, right? You can't be the father you want to be. You can't be the husband you want to be. You can't be the community leader you want to be until you're around men. Because nobody holds you accountable like men do. You can manipulate your wife. You can manipulate women. I mean, you know, a lot of people think it's hard. It's not hard at all, honestly, right? You can tell a woman something and she's so confused that she done confused herself around it. You know what I mean? And you're like, no, this is just what it is, right? You cannot get over on a man. Right, a man can tell his wife anything. Get in Pastor Bob's office, and he like, now you know that ain't gonna fly over here. I know you're lying. Right, so don't try that when you get in here. a man who wants to be a godly man, who wants to be a kingdom man, who wants to be a good husband and a good father, the only way you're going to get there is by being accountable to men.
That's good.
If you decide to isolate yourself, you will never become all of who God wants you to be. And so I know men right now, married men, who decided to isolate themselves. But they were isolating themselves because there's going to be some accountability when you get with men.
Yeah.
Right? The guy I talked about earlier who divorced his wife, out of fellowship, completely out of it. He went from a marriage where he was in fellowship constantly with men and men's groups to deciding to take a step back away from all of that. Because if he was with men, they would have noticed it right away. And so you need to, if you're going to be the man that your best self, you got to get in fellowship with other men because they're going to hold you accountable in a way that women cannot and won't even know how.
He took the words right out of my mouth. Literally, I would say to a man who's existing in this lonely space, you'll never be who you're supposed to be. You'll never be who you can be if you're relying on yourself to produce that result. Right. Next thing I would say, the rejection that you fear, that you fear happening to you if you seek out male relationships or male companionships. The question I would ask you to ask yourself is that the story that you're telling yourself, or is it actually true?
Right.
In other words, are you telling yourself that if I try to make a friend, I'm probably going to be rejected? Nobody wants to be cool with me. Nobody likes me. I'm not the kind of person that other guys will want to be friends with. I would ask you to challenge your own narrative, the story that you're telling yourself, because you do have value. To that, I would add an action item. Be willing to go first. So if you're at the gym and you see another brother and y'all was spoken the last 3 or 4 times you've been in the gym, just walk up to him and say, hey, man, my name is... And let it begin to evolve from there. But don't be afraid to go first, as opposed to waiting for somebody to come and initiate you to then bestow on you the worth of being a friend. Right. You're already worthy of being a friend. You just might have to take the first step.
I love it. Well, y'all heard it first here. You heard it here first. Men need men. Show yourself friendly. Don't be afraid to take the first step. I love it. I hope and pray that you got some wisdom and also are inspired and motivated to cultivate the relationships and the friendships that are so necessary for you to be the man that God has called you to be. Now, we always love to leave you with 2 resources, and Pastor Bob Gay has given us 2 resources to follow up on. We have here Kingdom Men Rising and No More Excuses, both books by Tony Evans that can be found on Amazon. We suggest that you get these books, you read through them, give them to the men in your life, to the young men in your life. Help them to realize the importance of friendships and also the dangers of isolation. So thank you for tuning in. We pray that you've enjoyed Part 1 and Part 2. Remember, relationships are an integral part to your mental health and also to you living well, which is what we always pray. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, time to change, time to change.